wanted to ask Andy about your definition of magic and how it goes back to the phone-based life and it's magical.
Yeah.
And I love the way you talk about it in your book. Can you share that definition of magic?
Sure, because I do think this is why we acquire technology, individually and to some extent collectively, is when it's sold to us as this magical development that is going to unlock kind of cheat codes for the universe, and shortcuts for the universe. And so I think what we're after when we're after magic is instant, effortless, and therefore impersonal power. So instant, like right away it'll happen. Effortless, I just swipe or wave my hand or utter a spell. So very little exertion of myself. But by definition, that has to be impersonal because nothing personal is instant.
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you said, Jonathan, about the way that personhood used to be embedded over time.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about it being embedded in bodies and places, but it's also meant to be embedded like intergenerationally, and that sense of self evolved over a great deal of time. That's not magic. Magic will never feel like that. And then if it's effortless, it's also not personal because all things involving persons, one way or another, engage you in. There's a kind of strenuousness to being with persons. Even in this conversation, I'm having to work to attend, but I could be on my phone right now, except I left it over there, Jonathan, for you. I left my phone far away, and we all know the itch of wanting that instant, effortless power that will shortcut the vulnerabilities and difficulties of being human and allow us to just tap into this feeling that I'm in charge of the world right now, of some little slice of the world. And I do think that's what we're chasing. And in some ways, it's what we get. It's just that a bunch of side effects come with it that are not advertised.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Right. So one of the best ideas I've heard, one of the things that really made me excited and felt like, wow, this really unlocks a lot, was last Tuesday or Wednesday night. There was an event hosted by two British people who run this thing called the Forum, and they had a speaker, and the speaker was Andy Crouch, and I'd only met him on Zoom before, and so he spoke, and he talked about magic, and I thought that was really interesting, and that fits, like when we first saw the internet and especially a web browser, it was like, hey, do you want to know everything instantly? You want omniscience? Boom, here you have it. But here's what really blew me away. When you took it the next step, you said, okay, once we understand that technology is magic, it's instant, it's effortless, it's easy, everything gets easy. And then you said, the three zones of human formation, the three places where children get formed into persons, into adults, into competent people, there are three places: school, family, and church or religious institutions. And then you said, technology or the magic has come into all three. Right. That now family life is now an eternal fight over screen time. School is an eternal, they give up. Most of the teachers have given up. Just, okay, fine, you're going to be on your phone. I'll lecture anyway. No one will hear me. And church as well, I hear. I did a show with Terry Mattingly, and as a Christian broadcaster, and he asked his priest, was going to Russia, he said, ask them what their biggest challenge is. And the priest came back and he said, they all said the same thing, it's the phones. Yeah. It's impossible to get anyone's attention. So, but here's the thing. But here's the thing that Andy said that was so powerful. He said, when magic comes into a place of formation, persons don't get formed,
right? Because
everything's easy. Right. You don't have to exert the effort to master a skill, to experience stress or anxiety, and then realize you can overcome it. So that really got me, because I've been thinking a lot about moral development, moral formation, and how the phones just short circuit everything.
Yeah, and I think it helps clarify why we get so much resistance when we raise questions about this stuff, because it is quite useful in many contexts. Mm-hmm. If you want to be super productive, technology can really help. If you want to get ideas out there, it can help. It's just that to become the kind of person who has an idea, you have to be formed, and that will not happen through magic. That's right. And that's the paradox is, sure, it can scale all kinds of things. The one thing it can't scale is becoming the kind of person who has something worth scaling. Yeah. And how do we do that? And how do we kind of cordon it off in a way from the formative parts of our lives? One of the questions I have for Jonathan is, I want you to go beyond childhood. I feel like this is endemic to all stages of life. I mean, we could tell stories presumably about grandparents on Facebook that would curl your hair, right? Yeah. Like everybody is being swept into a phone-based life. Yeah, that's right. And I think there's an analogy, at least I understand we as adults don't get to play in the same way that we did when we were small squirrels, but but isn't that life of exploration and risk that is unbuffered in some ways? I mean, one of the things about the media life, I mean, first of all, it's just a tiny amount of information you're getting from those other people about who you are. I think that's the other problem with that phone-based self is that phone-based self is getting so little.
And like, it's all fragmented. It's incompatible.
Right. I've learned more about what it's like to be Jonathan Haidt, which I don't know much about, but much more about that in 20 minutes with you in person than I did on an hour on Zoom, right? Because the bandwidth is higher and so forth. That's right. So when we're together in person, the risk is higher, but it's also safer in a way. Right. The exploration can be done in a more kind of integrated way rather than this sort of wandering that we do on the phones. So I just feel like the play-based life is not a bad invitation for adults as well as children.
Yeah.
Does that seem fair?
No, that is fair. The reason why I focused my book on kids and I decided not to write it for Gen Z, I decided to write it for the adults because it's so urgent that we change the conditions of childhood this year, not in 2 or 3 years. We have got to do it now. And what I realized, and part of the reason I decided to do that is the benefits from doing something while the brain is still growing, while the person is still forming, are so enormous, whereas the benefits to us adults are much smaller. And secondly, for me to tell adults what to do with their own life is, I mean, that's a little much. But for me to tell adults who are all worried about their children, here's what's happening to your kids, here's how you stop it. That was just a much more focused and necessary thing. And so I really was focused on children. And when I was almost done with the book, and I was way behind deadline, but I was like, I could see the end of the book. And I realized at the end of telling the girl story and the boy's story and the play story and all that, I realized I haven't really written anything for adults. And it's exactly as you said, we all feel fragmented. We all feel that we have a phone-based life now. And while our rates of anxiety and depression as adults aren't up very much, our ability to focus is way down. Most people say. A lot of us feel that. I feel that. So that's why I stuck in, at the very end of the writing, I stuck in a chapter on spirituality. And I think that's why I'm here tonight, is because of that chapter. And I said in the beginning of it, like, okay, the whole book was like social science about development, but you know what? I'm just going to speak as a human being. Like, I feel exhausted too, we all do. And what's this doing to us? And so what I did was, because my first book was called The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom, and a lot of it was religious and spiritual wisdom from thousands of years ago, East and West. What did our ancestors come to find, and what do they want to pass on to us? And the religious traditions are the greatest repository of ancient wisdom. There are non-religious traditions too, and Stoicism, things like that. But I reviewed them all, and it turned out that, what did the Stoics, any of them say about a flourishing life? Well, be slower to judge and quicker to forgive. I mean, that's And what does a phone-based life tell you, especially if you're on Twitter or any sort of social media? It says, judge now, right now, because if you don't judge now, you're going to be judged for not judging. Wow. So quick. No sympathy, no mercy, no humanity. Just be out there displaying. Oh, and by the way, make yourself look big and important. Whereas what do religious traditions counsel? Humility, self-transcendence, slow down, quiet. So, it's like you make a list of everything that the ancients told us. It's all, like a phone-based life pushes you away from all of that. And that's why even though I'm a Jewish atheist, I see a spiritual crisis all around us.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I just highlight that chapter that truly is for everybody, not just the kids, not just the parents of kids, but for everybody, these 6 spiritual practices that help children and adults. So important. I wrote them down right here. Here are the 6. 6 spiritual practices: shared sacredness, participating in any group that's organized for a moral, charitable, or spiritual purpose. 2, embodiment. Could be any physical ritual, from eating together, so important, to sports, to praying together. Number 3, stillness, silence, and focus. a meditative type practice. Number 4 is self-transcendence, sacrificing for a cause larger than your own. Number 5 is what you just said, less judgment, more forgiveness. And number 6 is finding awe. You emphasize nature, but there are lots of different areas to find awe. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is that I thought it was a beautiful way to bring everybody in. You can be an atheist. You could have a religious background and still appreciate all these things that you meticulously researched. And so thank you for that. And I wanted to ask Andy whether there's, in this lovely list, are there things that you think of from a religious background that can add to that or make it juicier in some way?
The juicy addition of religion.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I love the list. And I think it's you've tapped into wisdom. There is wisdom for us in how to be human. I especially love the nature thing. That's a bad way of putting it. The insight so one of the things, probably the most, I would say, the most spiritually transformative thing I've done with respect to my phone is, first of all, never to have it in my bedroom and to leave it downstairs at night. And when I go downstairs in the morning, I do not pick it up. I make tea, which is my real dependence in life, and then I go outside. I started doing this about 5 years ago. I go out my front door, and I literally do this everywhere I am in the world. I've been on the 30th floor of like high-rise hotels, and I find an elevator. Before I look at a screen, I find a way to the out of doors. And I have to say, I step out often in the morning. This morning was about 5:30 a.m. I step out, and suddenly I'm a creature. I'm small, quite small. The screen makes you feel very big. By the way, play, I think, is partly about humility. Play is meant to be it often doesn't work out. Like all those little games you tried to make up as a kid, they weren't great games. They did not become the next basketball or Quidditch or whatever, right? It's okay. Like play is humbling. When I step outside, I feel this just release of trying to be too much, and I look up at, right now it's full moon tonight and last night, and I see that moon or setting in the morning. So that's been very meaningful. The thing I would probably add, Wendy, these practices are great, and I think very self-disciplined people of any background can decide to incorporate them. My own view is you might consider apprenticing yourself to someone who really did it in an exemplary way. That apprenticeship, kind of relating to the non-billiard ball self, that is the self that is not just constructed by by dint of my own research and putting it into practice, but that I identify with someone who I think, as best as I can tell, lived life under all the pressures that I live. And yet did it just wholeheartedly. For me, that's someone who interestingly did not even use the primal technologies available to him. Jesus of Nazareth, interestingly, in the Roman Empire, they've got the two first real technologies in the sense I would want to define it, which is writing and money. Writing and money are like the Ur technologies of the human story, but the original magic. And people originally saw them as quite magic. People who could write were kind of like magicians. And when you had money, it was like being able to do magic because it was very rare in the ancient world. But the Roman Empire had more of it than it ever had before. And the very interesting thing about Jesus is he did not write anything. All we know about him, we know from others did write, but he himself left no written record, unlike Plato, unlike many wise, unlike Moses. And he never used money, as far as we know. When a question comes up about taxation, he says, does anybody have a denarius on them? He doesn't have one. He has it, and they bring it. He's like, who's on this thing anyway? It's Augustus Caesar, the only face you ever see in Rome. And so the idea that in the midst of technology, there was this way to live this life completely free of it that is exemplary in significant ways, for me, is compelling. And you might want to apprentice yourself rather than just rolling your own. That would be maybe my one addition.